The words hit me like a slap, though my face stayed calm, a mask I'd perfected over decades. My ex is coming to Christmas dinner, my husband, Richard, said, stirring his coffee in our kitchen, his eyes fixed on the mug like it was safer than meeting mine. His tone was light, as if he'd just mentioned a change in the weather, but it landed heavy, stirring something dark in me. I was 71, my hands worn from years of scrubbing dishes, folding laundry, and wiping tears, mine and others. I smiled, tight-lipped, and said, "Of course." My voice was warm, honey-sweet, but inside, I was a storm waiting to break. Richard didn't know I'd already made my move. I'd invited her fiancé, Paul, a man who didn't tolerate fools or betrayals. What happened next? It unraveled Richard, stripped him of his charm and left him exposed, a broken man in the wreckage of his own making. Before I tell you how it all played out, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to know where this story finds you. Richard and I had been married for 39 years, a lifetime stitched together with small compromises and quiet sacrifices. We'd raised 2 kids, Emily and Mark, through sleepless nights, school plays, and heartbreaks. I'd stood by Richard during his long hours at the accounting firm, his work trips that sometimes carried a faint whiff of perfume, my own battles with arthritis and a cancer scare that left me hollow for months. I thought we'd weathered the worst, settled into a love that was more habit than fire, but solid enough to last. Then, 6 months ago, I found the emails. I wasn't snooping. Richard had left his laptop open on the dining table, a careless slip for a man who prided himself on control. There they were, messages to Vanessa, his ex from before we met, the woman he'd once called the one that got away, in a whiskey-fueled confession early in our marriage. I'd let it go then, told myself it was just nostalgia, a ghost that couldn't hurt me. But these emails were alive, intimate, full of pet names like Ness and shared memories of summer nights, promises to catch up soon. My stomach twisted, but I didn't cry. I closed the laptop, my hands steady, and started planning. Vanessa was a shadow from his past, a woman I'd met only once, 20 years ago at a charity gala in town. She glided in, all red lipstick and silk, her eyes sliding over me like I was the help, lingering on Richard with a smile that felt like a claim. I'd smiled back, played the good wife, my apron pressed and my manners perfect. Now, she was back, invited into my home for Christmas dinner, and Richard thought I was too old, too tired, to notice the game he was playing. He was wrong. I'd spent a lifetime learning his weaknesses, his tells, the way his left eyebrow twitched when he lied, the way he'd clear his throat before spinning his story. He thought he was clever, but I was sharper. When he announced Vanessa was coming, I didn't flinch. "That's fine, dear," I said, stirring the gravy on the stove, the rich smell of turkey filling the kitchen. "The more, the merrier." He didn't catch the edge in my voice, didn't see the fire in my eyes. He thought he was orchestrating this, his little reunion with Vanessa under my roof, in front of our family. But I'd already done my research. Vanessa was engaged now, to Paul, a contractor with a reputation for loyalty and a temper when crossed. I found him on social media, his posts full of photos with Vanessa, his arm around her like a shield, his smile proud but protective. I created a burner email, posed as an old friend of Vanessa's, and sent him a message: "Vanessa's coming to our Christmas dinner at Richard's insistence. It wouldn't be right without you there. Please join us." A lie, but a small one, and Paul's reply came within hours, enthusiastic, confirming he'd be there. I smiled at my screen, the first piece of my plan clicking into place like a lock. Christmas Eve arrived, the air sharp with cold, our house glowing with lights. I'd strung myself, my hands aching from the effort but steady with purpose. I'd spent days preparing: roast turkey with crispy skin, creamy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with fried onions, pecan pie with a crust so flaky it could make you weep. Our kids, Emily and Mark, were coming with their spouses, and I'd invited the neighbors, the Wilsons and the Carters, to round out the table. Richard thought he was running the show, his ego inflated at the thought of Vanessa in our home, her presence a secret thrill he thought I'd miss. He didn't know I was the one setting the stage, pulling strings he couldn't see. Vanessa arrived at 5:30, her heels clicking on the porch like a warning. She wore a cashmere coat, her perfume sharp as jasmine, her red lipstick a bold slash against her pale skin. She hugged Richard a moment too long, her hand lingering on his arm, her eyes barely meeting mine as she stepped inside. "Ellen, you look, well," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if my gray hair and sensible shoes made me invisible. I smiled, handing her a glass of mulled wine, the spices masking the bitterness in my throat. "So good to see you, Vanessa. It's been too long." I played the perfect hostess, my apron pristine despite hours in the kitchen, my gray hair pinned neatly in a bun. Inside, I was counting the minutes, my heart a steady drumbeat of anticipation. The doorbell rang at 6:15. Richard answered, expecting another neighbor, his face set in that charming smile he used on everyone. Instead, Paul stood there, broad-shouldered, his flannel shirt straining against his frame, his handshake firm enough to make Richard wince. "You must be Richard," Paul said, his voice warm but with a steel edge. "Vanessa's told me so much about you." Richard's smile flickered, a crack in his carefully built facade. I swooped in, all charm, my voice bright. "Paul! I'm so glad you could make it." I ushered him inside, introducing him to Vanessa, whose face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. "Oh, Paul," she stammered, her eyes darting to Richard, then to me. "I didn't know you were." "Surprise!" I said, clapping my hands like a delighted child, my smile wide enough to hide the blade behind it. "I thought it'd be fun to have everyone together." Richard shot me a look, confusion laced with something darker, suspicion, maybe, but he couldn't place it. Vanessa's smile was tight, her fingers gripping her wineglass like a lifeline. Paul, oblivious, thanked me warmly, his gratitude genuine. The air in the room thickened, a storm brewing beneath the tinsel and candlelight, and I felt the first thrill of victory. Dinner began, the table groaning with food, the candles casting soft shadows on the walls. I'd seated Paul next to Vanessa, directly across from Richard, with me at the head, my eyes missing nothing. Emily and Mark chatted with their spouses about work and holiday plans, the neighbors swapping stories about their grandkids' antics. Vanessa kept glancing at Richard, her nerves betraying her in the way her fork trembled slightly. Paul, bless his heart, was all charm, talking about his construction business, his plans for their spring wedding in the mountains. "Vanessa's been so excited to reconnect with old friends," he said, squeezing her hand, his smile proud. Her smile was brittle, her knuckles white against the tablecloth. Then Richard, 3 glasses of wine in, made his mistake. "Remember that summer at the lake, Vanessa?" he said, his voice too loud, too familiar, cutting through the hum of conversation. "You and me, sneaking out to the dock at midnight, skinny dipping under the stars?" His laugh was reckless, oblivious to the silence that crashed over the table like a wave. Emily's fork froze midair, her eyes narrowing. Mark coughed, glancing at me, his brow furrowed. Paul's smile vanished, his hand tightening around his glass until I thought it might shatter. "Skinny dipping?" he said, his voice low, dangerous, each word a blade. "You never mentioned that, Ness." I leaned forward, my voice sweet as the pecan pie waiting in the kitchen. "Oh, Richard, tell us more." I don't think Paul's heard this one. Richard's face reddened, his eyes darting to me, realizing he'd stepped into a trap of his own making. Vanessa tried to save him, her voice high and brittle. "It was nothing, Paul, just silly kid stuff from years ago, before we met." Paul's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Kid stuff, huh? Funny, you never mentioned midnight docks with your ex." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, their forks clinking awkwardly against their plates. Emily stared at her father, her expression a mix of confusion and betrayal. Mark whispered something to his wife, who looked like she wanted to disappear. I excused myself to get dessert, but not before twisting the knife deeper. "Vanessa, didn't you tell me you and Richard have been catching up lately? All those emails?" Her fork clattered to her plate, the sound sharp in the heavy silence. Richard's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine, wide with shock. Paul turned to Vanessa, his voice steady but cold as ice. "Emails? What emails?" The neighbors pretended to study their napkins, the air thick with tension. Emily's voice cut through, sharp and hurt. "Dad, what's Mom talking about?" I slipped into the kitchen, my heart pounding with grim satisfaction, letting the chaos I'd sparked unfold. From the doorway, I heard it all, Paul's voice rising, Vanessa stammering excuses, Richard trying to backpedal with his usual charm, but it was crumbling. "It's not what you think," Richard said, his voice strained, but Paul wasn't buying it. "You invite my fiancé to your house, talk about old times like I'm not here? What's your game, man?" Emily's voice joined in, laced with betrayal. "Dad, what's going on? Mom, did you know about this?" Mark's tone was quieter but just as sharp. "This is messed up, Dad." I returned with the pie, my face serene, my hands steady as I set it on the table. "Oh, I just wanted a nice dinner, sweetheart," I said to Emily, my voice calm. "I didn't expect your father to get so nostalgic." Paul stood, his chair scraping the floor, the sound like a gunshot. "We're leaving," he said, his eyes locked on Richard, his voice low and final. "Don't contact her again." Vanessa grabbed her coat, avoiding everyone's gaze, her face flushed with shame. The door slammed behind them, the sound echoing through the house. The neighbors mumbled excuses, gathering their things, eager to escape the tension. Emily and Mark stayed, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. "Dad, what the hell was that?" Mark asked, his voice tight. Richard tried to brush it off, muttering about old memories and misunderstandings, but Emily wasn't having it. "Mom, why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I shrugged, slicing the pie with deliberate care. "I just wanted everyone to feel included, sweetheart. I didn't know your father would make such a scene." My voice was calm, but inside, I was alive with the thrill of it. Richard's eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw fear there, fear of me, of what I'd done, of what I knew. After everyone left, Richard cornered me in the kitchen, his face a storm of anger and shame. "You set me up, Ellen," he hissed, his voice low, his hands clenched. I turned to him, my voice steady, cold as the December air outside. "You brought her into our home, Richard. You've been emailing her for months, sneaking around, thinking I'm too old to notice. You thought you could play me for a fool, but I'm not the one looking foolish now." He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in our 39 years, I'd silenced him, stripped him of his confidence, his control. The fallout was slow, relentless, and sweeter than I'd imagined. Emily and Mark pulled back, their trust in their father fractured. They called less, visited rarely, their disappointment a weight Richard couldn't shake. Word spread in our small town, gossip travels faster than wildfire here. Richard, the charming deacon, the man who tipped his hat to strangers and led prayers at First Baptist, became a cautionary tale whispered over coffee at the diner. He stopped going to church, stopped smiling at the grocery store, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his ruined reputation. Vanessa and Paul moved away, or so I heard through the grapevine. I didn't care. I'd done what I needed to, without raising my voice or shedding a tear. I stayed, let Richard live with the wreckage he'd made, knowing I'd outplayed him at his own game. I kept those emails, saved on a flash drive hidden in my jewelry box, a reminder of what I'm capable of when pushed. Sometimes, late at night, I read them, not out of pain but pride. I'm not the quiet wife Richard thought he married, the one who'd look the other way forever. Revenge doesn't heal the cracks in a marriage, but it's a fire that keeps you warm when the world feels cold. I sleep better now, knowing I took back the power he thought was his. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment with your city, I'd love to know where you are. And if you've ever been betrayed, don't let it break you. Turn it into something sharp, something yours.